It was a warm afternoon when Emily found herself driving down the dusty road leading to the ranch. She had been thinking about this day for months, ever since she first heard about the rancher who was known for his hard work and strong, quiet demeanor. A part of her was nervous, unsure of what to expect, but another part was excited about the opportunity. The ranch had a reputation for not only producing high-quality cattle, but also for being a place where tough, resilient people worked together in harmony. Emily had always been a city girl, and though she loved the countryside, she had little experience with ranch life. The idea of helping out at the ranch for a few weeks was appealing. She had recently lost her job in the city and was looking for something different, something that would help her find a sense of purpose again. When she heard about the rancher's need for assistance with his cattle, she saw it as the perfect opportunity to escape the hustle and bustle of her previous life and reconnect with the world outside the city. As Emily's car rumbled over the gravel road, she couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. She had read about the rancher's history, how he had built his business from the ground up, working tirelessly day and night. His name was Jack, and though she hadn't met him in person, she had heard enough to know that he was someone who commanded respect. He had a reputation for being no-nonsense and hard-working, someone who didn't waste time with unnecessary chatter. The ranch was located on a vast stretch of land, surrounded by rolling hills and open fields. The sun cast long shadows over the landscape, and the distant mountains seemed to frame the entire scene like a picture. It was a beautiful place, but also one that required hard work and dedication. Emily could already tell that life on the ranch wouldn't be easy. As she pulled up to the main house, she noticed the simple but sturdy buildings, all built with practicality in mind. There were no fancy decorations, just the essentials: barns, equipment sheds, and the ranch house. A few cows wandered lazily around the pasture, and the sound of horses in the distance added to the peaceful yet industrious atmosphere. Emily parked her car and stepped out, taking in the fresh, clean air. The scent of hay and earth mixed with the faint smell of wood smoke from a nearby fire. She felt a strange sense of calm settle over her, even though she had no idea what she was walking into. She walked up to the ranch house, where a tall man was standing on the porch. He was looking out across the fields, his back turned to her. Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure of what to say, but then the man turned around. His eyes were sharp and focused, and his posture was confident yet relaxed. He looked like someone who had spent years working the land, someone who had earned every bit of strength and wisdom in his body. "Hello," Emily said, taking a deep breath. "I'm Emily. I'm here about the job." The man studied her for a moment, as though weighing her presence. His gaze was steady but not unfriendly. "I'm Jack," he said simply. "You're here to help with the cattle, right?" Emily nodded, feeling a little self-conscious under his intense stare. "Yes, that's right. I've worked with animals before, but not on a ranch this big." Jack didn't say anything at first, but then he stepped aside and motioned for her to come inside. "Come in, we'll talk inside. There's a lot to do around here." Emily followed him into the house, where she was greeted by the warm, earthy smell of wood and leather. The house was rustic, with wooden beams overhead and a stone fireplace that looked like it had been there for decades. There were no frills, no modern distractions, just simple, practical furniture and a few well-placed items that told the story of someone who valued the essentials in life. Jack led her to the kitchen, where he gestured for her to sit. He poured them both a cup of coffee, then sat down across from her, his hands resting on the table. "So, you're looking for work. What makes you think you can handle the ranch?" Jack asked, his voice calm but direct. Emily took a deep breath before answering. "I've been working in the city for years. I've done office work, customer service, things like that. But recently I felt like I needed something more. I needed to get my hands dirty, do something that mattered. I've always loved animals, and I think I could be useful here." Jack nodded slowly, but he didn't seem convinced. "You've got the right attitude, I'll give you that. But this is tough work. It's not a 9-to-5 job. You'll have to be ready for long hours, unpredictable days, and plenty of hard labor. If you're not ready for that, it won't work." Emily felt a surge of determination rise within her. "I'm ready," she said firmly. "I want to try." Jack studied her for a moment longer, then stood up. "All right, I'll show you around and we'll see how you do. No promises, but if you can handle it, I'll put you to work." He led her outside, showing her the various parts of the ranch. There were barns filled with hay and equipment, wide open fields where the cattle roamed freely and pastures lined with sturdy fences. Jack explained the daily routines, the feeding schedules, and the responsibilities that came with managing such a large operation. As they walked, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the vastness of it all. She had never seen so much land in her life. Everything was simple yet essential, and it was clear that Jack had a deep respect for the land and the animals he cared for. After a while, they reached a large barn where the cattle were kept. Jack explained how to properly feed and manage them, pointing out the differences between the different breeds. Emily was eager to learn, asking questions and absorbing every detail he shared. Though Jack remained quiet and to the point, it was clear that he was a man of experience, someone who knew the ranch like the back of his hand. As the afternoon wore on, Emily felt herself becoming more comfortable in the environment. She still had a lot to learn, but she was determined to prove herself. Jack's quiet confidence was reassuring, and she could sense that he wasn't a man who wasted time with small talk. He expected results, and Emily was ready to show him that she was capable of delivering. That evening, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a brilliant orange, Emily sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the last of the day's light fade behind the distant hills. It had been a long, exhausting day, but also one of the most fulfilling she had ever experienced. She was beginning to understand the quiet power that came with living on a ranch, a power that came from hard work, responsibility, and a deep connection to the land. As Emily sat there, lost in her thoughts, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning around, she saw Jack walking toward her. He stopped a few feet away, looking out at the same view she had been admiring. "How'd you like your first day?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of pride. "I liked it. I think I'm going to enjoy being here." Jack nodded, his face unreadable. "Good. Just remember, the ranch doesn't give you any second chances. You'll have to prove yourself every single day." Emily nodded in return, her resolve firm. "I will." And with that, she knew that her journey on the ranch had just begun. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The next morning, Emily woke up early. The sun had barely started to rise, and already the ranch was alive with activity. The distant sound of cows lowing and the soft clatter of equipment being moved filled the air. She stretched, feeling a mix of nervousness and excitement. Today would be her first full day working on the ranch, and she wanted to make a good impression. After a quick breakfast of coffee and toast, she put on the work boots Jack had given her and headed outside. The air was cool, but it had the promise of a warm day ahead. The ranch looked different in the soft light of the early morning. The wide open spaces felt even more expansive in the stillness, and the sounds of nature seemed more pronounced. Emily felt like she was stepping into a whole new world, one that was far removed from the city life she had known for so long. Jack was already outside, his broad figure moving effortlessly across the land as he made his way toward the barn. Emily hurried to catch up with him, feeling a little out of place in her new boots but determined to keep up. "Good morning," she said, trying to sound confident. Jack nodded without looking up. "Morning. Got a lot to do today. You ready?" Emily nodded, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. "I'm ready." They walked together to the barn, where Jack quickly started explaining the tasks for the day. There was a lot of feeding to do, and the cattle needed to be checked to ensure they were healthy and well fed. Emily listened closely, trying to absorb everything Jack said. She could tell that Jack wasn't the kind of person who liked to repeat himself, so she made sure to pay attention. He handed her a bucket filled with feed. "Start with the cows in the first pen. I'll take care of the others." Emily nodded and made her way to the first pen, her heart racing a little. The cows were bigger up close, and they looked at her with their large, dark eyes as she approached. She had fed animals before, but never on a ranch this large. She didn't want to make any mistakes. With a steady hand, Emily began to pour the feed into the trough. The cows moved forward eagerly, their noses sniffing the air. Emily watched them, trying to remain calm. She felt the weight of the responsibility Jack had placed on her shoulders, and though the work was simple, she knew it was important. The cattle needed to be well fed to stay healthy, and that was her job now. As she worked, Jack came over to check on her. He stood at the edge of the pen, his arms crossed, watching her quietly. Emily tried not to feel self-conscious under his gaze, but it was hard not to. Jack was a man of few words, and his silence was often more intimidating than anything he could have said. Still, she pressed on, determined to do well. After she finished with the feed, Jack motioned for her to follow him. "Now we've got to check on the fences," he said. "A few of them need repairs." Emily followed him across the field, her boots sinking slightly into the soft ground with each step. The pasture stretched out before them, dotted with cows grazing peacefully. The fences that surrounded the fields were old but sturdy, built to last. Jack led her to a section of fence where a few posts had started to lean. It was clear that the work ahead of them would take time, but Jack didn't seem bothered by it. "You'll help me with this," Jack said, handing her a hammer and a few wooden posts. "It's important to keep the cattle inside the pastures. A weak fence can cause problems." Emily nodded, accepting the tools. She had never worked on fencing before, but she was eager to try. Jack explained what needed to be done, and they set to work. The morning passed quickly as they hammered posts into the ground and tightened wires. It was hard work, but Emily found herself enjoying it. There was something satisfying about building something with your own hands, especially when the results were so visible. As they worked, Jack didn't speak much. He seemed content to let the quiet of the ranch settle around them. Emily, however, found herself thinking about the life she had left behind in the city. She had always been busy, always surrounded by noise and people. Here it was different. The pace was slower and the work was hard, but it felt meaningful. She liked the feeling of being needed, of knowing that every task she completed was important. By the time they finished the fence repairs, the sun was high in the sky and Emily's arms were sore from the work. She wiped the sweat from her brow, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. Jack glanced over at her and nodded. "Not bad," he said, his voice gruff but approving. "You've got the hang of it." Emily smiled, pleased with the compliment, even if it was simple. She wasn't looking for praise, but it was nice to know that Jack thought she was capable. "Thanks," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm happy to help." Jack didn't say much more, but he seemed satisfied with the day's work. He gestured for her to follow him back to the ranch house, where they could take a break before starting the next set of tasks. As they walked back, Emily couldn't help but feel a growing sense of connection to the land. The ranch was more than just a place where work needed to be done. It was a living, breathing entity that required care and attention, just like the animals it supported. Emily felt like she was becoming part of that rhythm, even though it was only her second day. At the ranch house, Jack led her inside and set down a simple lunch of sandwiches and fruit. They ate in silence for a while, and Emily found the quiet comfort of the moment oddly calming. After the intense work of the morning, the peacefulness of the house felt like a welcome break. "Tomorrow we'll need to work with the horses," Jack said after a while, his voice as calm as ever. "You ready for that?" Emily nodded, already looking forward to it. She had always admired horses, and though she had never ridden one, she had always wanted to learn. The idea of working with them on the ranch made her feel even more connected to the place. "I'm ready," she said with a smile. Jack didn't respond right away, but his gaze softened for a moment as though he was considering something. "You're starting to fit in around here," he said quietly. "Keep it up." Emily didn't know what to say, but she felt a surge of pride at his words. It was clear that Jack wasn't one to hand out compliments easily, so this small acknowledgement meant more than she could explain. As the afternoon wore on, they went back outside to work with the horses. Emily was eager to get started, and she was surprised at how quickly she learned to handle the horses. They were beautiful creatures, strong and graceful, and she quickly discovered that working with them was a lot like working with the cattle. Both required patience, focus, and a steady hand. By the time the day was done, Emily was exhausted but satisfied. The work had been hard, but it had also been fulfilling. She had learned more about the ranch in one day than she ever could have imagined, and she was eager to continue. As she sat down on the porch that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. This place was becoming more than just a job. It was becoming a part of her. And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The following days on the ranch became a blur of hard work and new experiences. Emily was adjusting to the rhythm of ranch life, and though the work was exhausting, it was also rewarding. Every day she learned something new, whether it was how to care for the horses, how to check on the cattle's health, or how to fix a broken fence. She found herself looking forward to each new challenge, even though it often pushed her beyond what she thought she could do. Jack had been keeping a close eye on her progress. He was a man of few words, but Emily noticed that every so often, he would give her a small nod of approval or a simple, "Good job," which was more praise than she had expected. It wasn't that Jack was unkind, but his manner was just direct. He didn't waste time on unnecessary words. Yet there was something about his straightforwardness that she appreciated. It was clear that he valued hard work and reliability above all else. One afternoon, Jack asked Emily to help him with a more complex task. They needed to move a herd of cattle from one pasture to another, a task that required careful planning and quick thinking. The cattle had to be herded through a narrow path that led from the lower fields to the upper ones, and if they weren't moved properly, they could scatter and get lost. Jack explained the plan to Emily as they walked toward the barn where the horses were kept. "You'll need to ride one of the horses," he said, "and help steer the cattle down the path. It'll take a while, but we'll have them settled in the upper pasture before sundown." Emily nodded, though she was nervous. She had ridden horses only a few times in her life, and those experiences had been brief and far from comfortable. The idea of riding one of the ranch's large trained horses made her stomach tighten. She knew it was an important task, but she wasn't sure if she was ready. Jack must have seen the hesitation on her face. "You'll be fine. Just follow my lead and stay calm. The horse will follow your direction if you stay steady." They reached the barn, where the horses were already saddled and ready for the job. Jack chose a strong, well-trained horse named Dusty for Emily, and she was relieved to see that Dusty seemed calm and patient. After Jack showed her how to mount the horse properly and gave her a few brief pointers, they were ready to go. Emily took a deep breath as she swung her leg over Dusty's back. The horse's gentle movements calmed her nerves a little, and she felt more confident once she was on the saddle. Jack mounted his own horse, a tall, powerful animal named Thunder, and led the way toward the cattle. "Stay close," he called back to Emily as they approached the herd. "We'll start slowly, and once we get them moving, you'll need to be ready to guide them through the path." The cattle were grazing lazily in the field, unaware of what was about to happen. As Jack rode into the herd, he urged the animals to start moving with a firm but calm voice. Emily followed behind, trying to stay steady on Dusty's back as they moved toward the herd. She kept her eyes focused on the cattle, watching for any signs of restlessness. It wasn't long before the herd began to stir. Jack expertly guided them toward the narrow path that led up the hill. Emily followed his lead, but she felt her pulse quicken as the cattle started to pick up speed. Some of the cows were more stubborn than others, and they began to veer off the path. Emily had to quickly adjust, using Dusty's reins to steer him in the right direction. "Don't panic," Jack called back to her. "Just keep your horse steady and focus on the path. The cattle will follow." The path was narrow and the terrain uneven. Emily had to concentrate hard to keep her balance and control Dusty. She felt her nerves start to fade as she focused on the task at hand. She urged Dusty forward, guiding him smoothly through the herd, making sure to keep the cattle moving in the right direction. But just as they neared the end of the path, one of the cows broke away from the herd and dashed toward the side of the field. Jack immediately spurred Thunder forward, chasing after the runaway cow with remarkable speed. Emily's heart raced. She knew that if one cow strayed too far, it could cause chaos for the entire herd. "Don't let it get away," Jack shouted as he pushed Thunder forward, gaining ground on the cow. Emily's instincts kicked in. She steered Dusty toward the cow, trying to stay steady as she urged her horse forward. Dusty's pace quickened, and Emily's body tensed as she focused on the runaway cow. She could feel the power in Dusty's movements as the horse sprinted toward the cow. In a moment of clarity, Emily leaned forward, giving Dusty a gentle nudge to move faster. She felt a surge of excitement as the horse responded, her grip on the reins firm but not tight. They closed the distance between them and the cow, and just as the cow began to veer off course again, Emily was able to block its path, forcing it back into the herd. Jack rode up beside her, a rare smile on his face. "Well done," he said. That was quick thinking. Emily felt a rush of pride, though she didn't want to let her guard down. She knew the work wasn't over yet. They still had to move the entire herd to the upper pasture without any more problems, but she was beginning to feel more confident in herself and in her ability to handle the challenges the ranch threw at her. The rest of the move went smoothly. With Jack's steady leadership and Emily's newfound confidence, the herd was soon settled into the upper pasture, grazing peacefully. The sky was beginning to change color as the sun began to set, painting the landscape in shades of orange and pink. Emily looked around at the vast stretch of land, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. "That wasn't so bad," she said, her voice a little breathless from the effort. Jack gave her another approving nod. "You handled it well. You're getting better at this." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of satisfaction that she hadn't expected. It was hard work, but it felt good to be part of something so important. The ranch wasn't just a place to live. It was a place where every person mattered, and every task played a part in keeping things running smoothly. As they headed back to the barn, Emily felt a deep sense of connection to the land and the animals. The work was tough, but it was also incredibly rewarding. She could see herself here for a long time, learning more and growing stronger with each passing day. That evening, as Emily sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching the stars begin to twinkle in the clear night sky, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. There was something about the simplicity of life on the ranch that made everything else seem less important. Here on this land, she had found something she had been searching for all along: purpose, challenge, and a sense of belonging. Tomorrow, there would be more work to do, more lessons to learn. But for now, Emily was content to sit in the quiet of the evening, knowing that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next few weeks on the ranch passed by in a blur of hard work and newfound friendships. Emily settled into a routine, waking up early with the sun and working late into the evening. The ranch, once an unfamiliar world to her, was now beginning to feel like home. She had learned so much in such a short time, from handling the horses with confidence to taking care of the cattle and repairing fences. Each day brought new challenges, but she found herself growing stronger and more capable with each one. Jack had been watching her progress closely, and while he still kept a distance, Emily noticed small signs of approval from him. Whether it was a brief nod after she finished a task or a simple good job when she did something right, it was clear that Jack was beginning to see her as a reliable part of the ranch team. She had earned his respect, but she knew that in this world, respect had to be continually earned, day after day. One afternoon, Jack asked Emily to join him on a long ride to the farthest part of the ranch. There was a section of land where the cattle sometimes wandered too far, and Jack needed to check on them to ensure they weren't getting into trouble. It was a task that required both patience and skill, and Jack didn't often ask anyone to help him with it. Emily was both nervous and excited to be included in this important task. "Ready for a longer ride?" Jack asked, his tone as steady as ever. Emily nodded, trying to hide the nerves that were bubbling inside her. "Yes, I'm ready." They saddled their horses and set out across the ranch, leaving the main part of the property behind. The land seemed endless as they rode across wide-open fields, the vastness of it all stretching out before them. The wind was cool against Emily's face, and the rhythmic sound of the horses' hooves on the soft earth created a peaceful, almost meditative atmosphere. It was moments like these when Emily felt a deep connection to the land and the animals, and she realized how much she had come to love the ranch. As they rode further out, Jack pointed out various landmarks, explaining the history of the land and the challenges he faced over the years. Emily listened intently, soaking up every word. Jack was a man of few stories, but when he did speak about the ranch's history, she could hear the pride in his voice. It was clear that this land meant everything to him. After a few hours of riding, they reached the far corner of the ranch, where a small group of cattle was grazing peacefully. Jack dismounted his horse and gestured for Emily to do the same. He explained that they needed to check the herd and make sure the cattle weren't straying too far from the main pasture. Emily followed Jack as he walked toward the herd. The cows seemed calm, but Jack still kept a sharp eye on them, making sure they were healthy and that none had wandered off. Emily moved carefully, trying to stay alert to the movements of the cattle. She had learned that the animals could be unpredictable, and it was important to stay vigilant. "Check the fence over there," Jack said, pointing to a section of the pasture that seemed a little more worn. "We don't want any cattle slipping through." Emily nodded and made her way to the fence. As she inspected the posts and wires, she realized that the ranch was always in need of constant maintenance. It wasn't just about tending to the cattle. It was about caring for everything: the land, the fences, the barns, and the horses. Everything needed attention, and Jack was always on top of it. Emily had come to admire his ability to manage it all, even if he didn't say much about it. After a few minutes, Emily returned to where Jack was standing, watching the herd. "The fence looks fine," she reported. "No issues," Jack gave her a brief nod. "Good, let's head back. We've still got work to do." They mounted their horses again and began the long ride back. As they rode in silence, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how much she had learned in the past few weeks. She wasn't just working on the ranch, she was becoming part of it. There was a rhythm to the way things worked here, a pace that was slower than anything she had known in the city. But it was also more grounded. Each task was purposeful, each moment had meaning. The ranch was alive in a way that the city never was. When they returned to the ranch house, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden light over the land. Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her as she dismounted from her horse. The day had been long, but it had also been fulfilling. She had helped Jack with an important task, and she could feel that he was beginning to trust her more. As they walked back toward the house, Jack turned to her and said, "You've done well. I'm starting to see that you're not just here to fill space. You've got the skills and you're learning fast." Emily smiled, grateful for the acknowledgement. It wasn't easy work, but every day she was learning more and becoming more confident in her abilities. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'm happy to be here." Jack gave her a small smile, the first one Emily had seen in a while. It was brief, but it was enough. "I'm glad you're here too." Later that evening, after a quiet dinner, Emily found herself sitting on the porch, watching the stars come out one by one. It was a clear night and the sky seemed endless. The cool breeze carried the scent of the earth and the faint sound of animals in the distance. There was a deep stillness in the air, a peace that Emily hadn't felt in years. She thought about the life she had left behind in the city, the rush, the noise, the constant movement. Here, there was none of that. The ranch was a place where time moved differently, where every day was shaped by the land and the work. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, Jack came out onto the porch, holding a cup of coffee in his hand. He sat down beside her without saying a word, just watching the night sky. Emily smiled to herself, feeling the weight of the day begin to lift. It was strange how comfortable she had become here in such a short time. After a few moments of silence, Jack spoke. "You're starting to understand the rhythm of this place," he said quietly. "It's not something you learn quickly, but you're getting there." Emily nodded, feeling a sense of pride. "I'm trying." Jack took a sip of his coffee and then looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. "You've got the right attitude. If you keep at it, there's a place for you here. The ranch needs people who are willing to work hard and stick with it." Emily felt a rush of gratitude. This wasn't just a job, it was a chance to build something real, something meaningful. And she was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, this was the life she had been searching for all along. As the stars sparkled overhead, Emily knew that her journey on the ranch was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more lessons to learn, but she was ready. With each passing day, she was becoming more than just a worker on the ranch. She was becoming a part of it, a part of something bigger than herself. And that was a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. The days seemed to blend together as Emily continued to adjust to life on the ranch. She had grown accustomed to waking up early, working through the long hours and getting her hands dirty. Each task, no matter how small, had become a source of pride. Whether it was mucking out the stables, fixing a fence, or guiding the cattle to a new pasture, Emily found herself embracing the hard work more than she ever thought possible. Jack had stopped keeping such a close watch on her, and instead he began to give her more responsibility. He trusted her now, and she could see it in the way he asked her to handle tasks that once seemed daunting. Her confidence had grown with each passing day, and it was clear to both of them that she was no longer just a temporary helper. She had become an integral part of the ranch. One morning, as the sun began to rise, Jack approached Emily with a new task. They had been experiencing some trouble with the water supply in one of the far fields, and he needed someone reliable to help fix the issue. "I'll need you to ride out to the north field with me," Jack said, his voice steady, but serious. "We've got a pipe leaking and it's causing problems with the irrigation system. It'll take most of the day to get it fixed, but I think you're ready for it." Emily nodded. She was familiar with the irrigation system, having helped with it a few times before. But this sounded more complicated than usual, and she wasn't sure how it would go. Still, she was determined to prove herself capable. "I'm ready," she said, trying to keep the nervousness out of her voice. Jack gave her a small, approving nod and motioned toward the horses. They saddled up quickly and rode off toward the northern part of the ranch. As they rode through the fields, Emily couldn't help but feel a deep sense of appreciation for the land. It wasn't just a place to work, it was a living, breathing entity that depended on people like her and Jack to keep it thriving. The ride to the north field was quiet, but Emily could sense that Jack was thinking about the task ahead. She had learned that when he was focused, he rarely spoke unless it was necessary. They arrived at the field just as the sun was reaching its peak, casting long shadows across the ground. The area where the pipe had broken was not far from the irrigation ditch that ran through the field. The pipe, which carried water from the nearby river to the crops, had cracked, and water was leaking out in several places. It wasn't a huge issue yet, but if left unattended, it could cause a loss of water for the crops, which could lead to much bigger problems. Jack and Emily dismounted and walked over to the broken pipe. It was obvious that it would take more than a simple fix to get it working properly again. The crack was deep and the surrounding area was muddy from the leaking water. "We'll need to replace the damaged section of pipe," Jack said, inspecting the break. "It won't be easy, but it's the only way to ensure the water flow isn't compromised." Emily nodded, her mind already working through the steps of the repair. She had worked with pipes before, but this was the first time she'd had to replace one on such a large scale. She knew it would take time, but she was ready for the challenge. The two of them worked together, digging up the earth around the broken pipe and carefully removing the damaged section. They had to dig deeper than expected as the pipe was buried fairly deep under the soil. The work was tiring, but Emily was determined to do it right. She had learned how to work hard and not give up, no matter how difficult the task. As they finally removed the broken piece and began to install the new pipe, Emily found herself thinking back on her time at the ranch. When she first arrived, she had no idea how to fix anything, let alone deal with the intricate systems that kept the ranch running. But now she felt like she was part of something much bigger than herself. She was helping to maintain a system that was not just about the animals or the crops. It was about everything working together in harmony. After hours of hard work, the new section of pipe was finally in place. Jack tightened the last bolt and stood up, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. Emily stepped back and surveyed their work. It wasn't easy, but they had managed to fix the problem. "Nice work," Jack said, his voice quiet but filled with approval. "That was a big job." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of pride. It hadn't been easy, but she had done it. "Thanks," she said. "It feels good to get it done." They stood there for a moment, looking at the newly repaired pipe. The sound of the running water began to fill the air as the flow resumed, and Emily felt a deep satisfaction knowing that the system was working again. It was moments like these when she realized how important her role was on the ranch. As they mounted their horses and began the ride back, Jack spoke again, his tone more relaxed than it had been in a while. "You've really come a long way, Emily," he said. "When you first got here, I wasn't sure how well you'd adapt. But now I can see that you're not just learning the work, you're owning it." Emily felt a rush of warmth at his words. She had worked hard to get to this point, and it meant a lot to hear Jack's approval. "I appreciate that," she said sincerely. "It's been a lot of hard work, but I've learned so much." Jack nodded, his expression softening. "That's the way it is around here. It's not an easy life, but it's a good one, and when you put in the effort, you get to see the results." As they rode back to the ranch house, Emily felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. The work was hard, but it was satisfying. She was beginning to understand the rhythm of ranch life, and she knew that she was becoming a vital part of it. She had earned Jack's trust, and more importantly, she had earned her place on the ranch. That evening, after a long day of work, Emily sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the land stretched out before her, peaceful and calm. For the first time in a long while, Emily felt at peace. The uncertainty she had felt when she first arrived had faded, replaced by a deep sense of belonging. Jack joined her on the porch, sitting in the chair beside her. They didn't speak for a while, just sat in the quiet, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. "You've done good here," Jack said finally, his voice soft. You're part of this ranch now, and that's not something I say lightly." Emily looked at him, surprised by the warmth in his words. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'm really glad I'm here." Jack gave a slight smile. "Me too. You've earned it." As Emily sat there, she realized that this was exactly the life she had been searching for. The hard work, the quiet moments of peace, and the sense of purpose, it was all coming together. And in that moment, she knew that this was just the beginning. The ranch had become more than just a place to work. It had become her home. And Emily was ready to build her future here, alongside the land and the people who had made her feel like she truly belonged.